proudly announces the return of Gauntlet. Battle cooperatively with up to 4 players, or for the first time ever, take the action online. The heroic alliance is resurrected. Gauntlet-seven-sorrows.
The game is similar to previous Gauntlets in that it does have a 4-player cooperative game mode. It does have the core 4 characters: the warrior, the Valkyrie, the wizard, and the elf. And the gameplay is supposed to be very easy to get into. So those are the core things. Obviously there are other elements like death, generator, stuff that people remember from all the Gauntlet games. But in terms of how we've evolved it, we've decided to make a new game mode, story mode, which actually has a fairly in-depth exploration of the story. You go through that with 1 or 2 players at a time, and then you alternate between the pairs of characters. So there are actually 6 characters total, and you'll pair the warrior and the Valkyrie will go through areas together, the wizard and the elf will go through areas together, and then the 2 new characters, the lancer and the tragedian, will go through areas together. And so the characters are really more well developed, both in terms of their personality and background. They have a lot of dialogue in the story mode, and also just what you do with them in terms of gameplay is a lot more well developed. You can think of the game, in terms of gameplay, it is much more of an action game than an RPG. So you get a lot of the stuff you find in fighting games, like you'll get trips, juggles, you can hit guy in the air while they're juggled, you can do grabs and throws, you can do blocking and counterattacks, so it's a much more visceral gameplay experience overall. Well, in the story mode, like I said before, you can play through with pairs of characters, and what that really means is that you can play one of the 2 characters of the pair at any given time, and a friend can play the other character. And if there isn't someone playing that character, they'll pop in for special story moments, because basically the warrior and the Valkyrie have a history and personality that they work off of each other to help progress each other's stories and backgrounds. The wizard and the elf have a similar setup, and so do the lancer and the tragedian. They're really intended to they're sort of intended to complement each other gameplay-wise. They're all intended to be perfectly compatible with all the different characters. But in terms of the story, certain characters fit specific roles, so that's why we put them together. We've adopted a number of different sort of cinematic camera styles. You will see some traditional isometric, like the isometric 3/4 views. You'll also see more of a rail camera that you see in a lot of Devil May Cry sort of style games, or Lord of the Rings. Also, we'll have mounted cameras. Basically, it's up to the designers to do intelligent camera placement, because we don't want the player to have to mess around with it. So really, we design our cameras first, we build the world up around that, and we try to make sure that it's always really visible and really scenic at the same time, so the player feels like they're never frustrated and they got a really good view of the beautiful environments. Well, the design of all the characters and the environments in the game, a lot of them are based in real-world locations and cultures. Obviously, they have their own fantastic spins, but like the warrior and the Valkyrie, they come from a culture that's inspired by Iceland, Scandinavian Viking influences, and their language, the names that they use, the style of their armor and weapons. In terms of the wizard is from a really sort of primitive Celt type culture. They're very warring, factious tribes. The evil empire in the game actually is one of my favorites. It's based off of sort of a what if. What if the Incan Empire in our world, the South American Incans, had advanced to become the most dominant culture in the world? So, you'll see these guys that are kind of like all the Imperial Guards, look kind of like Incan stormtroopers running around. So we're really trying to give players a good point of reference, but we want to get away from the standard fantasy stuff. Grounded, but still fantastic. Actually, we're currently running through both Xbox Live and GameSpy. Xbox Live, obviously, for Xbox, GameSpy for PS2. But that was a priority really early on, because Gauntlet isn't really Gauntlet without the cooperative, and we wanted to make sure that our online component was really stable. One of the new multiplayer elements that we added to Gauntlet-seven-sorrows is something that we call junction skills. Junction skills are really intended to be co-op gameplay elements. One character can pull them off, but it's pretty difficult to get a good effect out of it. What happens is one character will activate a junction pattern. That sets up a foundation seal, and then there are a number of orbits that carry other seals, kind of like planets, around that main seal. Other players can then move to intercept those seals, put down their own seal inside, and that completes a greater magical effect, with the area of effect being determined by how far apart those seals are. And then as an additional element that if players want to be concerned about, they can be, is The smaller the seal, the faster it moves and the more power it gives to the junction. The larger the seal, the slower it moves and the less powerful the overall effect is. So you kind of have to balance, like, do you want to go for the easy one or do you want to go for the really hard one? Because if you go for the hard ones, then the effect is going to be that much bigger and better. The game is coming out on PS2 and Xbox. In terms of the player's expectations, we're really designing this as an evolution of the Gauntlet franchise. But there are certain things that we really wanted to keep in mind, is that it really does have to be, at its core, very fun, raw gameplay. It's got to be easy to get into. It's got to have a lot of the classic elements, but at the same time, we want to, make it a little more grown up, which doesn't mean that it's really crazy and over the top, but just that it has, if you want to go through the story mode, you have a well-developed story. Because we find a lot of people like to play with their friend or their roommate through that story mode, and that gives you a sampling of all the different play styles. And then if you're really a hardcore action guy, you can get into the details of one particular character and just power that character through to their logical end, unlocking all their different combos, getting more and more powerful equipment until they're just like a super badass. So we're really trying to appeal to people that have fond memories of Gauntlet, but at the same time we know that that sort of gameplay, like on its own, it doesn't last long. So we really are trying to build on top of that to give players a more rich experience.
The heroic alliance is resurrected. Gauntlet-seven-sorrows coming soon.